Everyone, Cahlen here, and today I'm going to be putting up the Spiral Garden Electroculture project. So this is a little experiment with electroculture, which I'll describe a little bit, but I have also described in a previous video. Basically, I'm going to be putting this pole in the center of the Spiral Garden, and I'm going to be running this copper wire, which people donated to me. Thank you very much for those of you who helped me to get this for this project. And it's basically going to spiral up this pole, which is going to be, well over 6 feet tall. I'm 6 feet tall, so this basically the minimum for this amount of space would probably be about a 6-foot pole. So it's nice this thing's going to be above that. And then I'm going to wrap this all the way up to the top, and that's going to basically serve as kind of a big antenna. And it's also going to go down into the ground and actually spiral around the entire garden along the actual path of the spiral. So basically, let's take a closer look at what that's going to look like. Okay, so here's the Spiral Garden, which has had one full season. I've got a lot of videos on what we grew here last year. It was pretty successful. This year we've got a lot of sunchokes, and we're also going to have beans and squash, and there's some other stuff that's just coming up that we're going to let go, like the mullein. And in the middle here, you can see there's a spot where you can kind of stand, and I like to do my qigong standing here in the middle of the Spiral Garden. And the pole is going to go right here at the very start, and it will go down hopefully at least a foot or more, just to keep it from getting blown over in the wind, since it's going to be fairly tall. And normally you would go underneath, or basically what you would normally do is you just ground it into the ground. So you'd want to go fairly deep into the ground, and then the whole fairly large space around your garden is going to receive this positive effect. But what I'm going to do is try something that I haven't seen anyone doing, which is basically I'm going to run the wire along the entire spiral. So before I get started with the work, I just want to give you a quick rundown of my understanding of how this actually works. So there's multiple ways that you can affect plants using electromagnetism or electricity or dielectricity. One of them is, for example, you can put seeds on a fairly strong magnet. I think you put them on the south pole of the magnet around kind of the outside layer for maybe half an hour to an hour before you sprout them. And they're basically going to be much bigger and much healthier, more nutritious, and taste better. And basically that's something you can just try for yourself and see for yourself, and it's basically going to work every time. And it matters which pole that you put it on. If you put it on the other pole, then you're going to get kind of the opposite effect. There's another thing where you can actually magnetize, increase the magnetism. Basically the Earth's magnetic field has an effect on plants, and you can basically at this point in the stage of history, we're at a pretty low level here, and it used to be much higher, and we also used to have much more CO2. So this planet used to be a much more lush place. But basically you can increase the magnetism that the plants are receiving from the Earth by basically running lines of galvanized steel wire. Kind of has to be running from north to south, and you have to have a magnet in the south which is aligned with the poles of the Earth. And you got to keep in mind that the North Pole of the planet is actually the South Pole of the magnet of the Earth, okay? So we're actually upside down, so that can get confusing. But anyways, you should put the magnet on the south side. It's cylinder magnets with a galvanized wire running through the middle of them, and the galvanized wire just runs basically across the entire length of where you're planting, right? So basically what that's going to do is it's going to encourage the magnetism of the planet to flow more strongly in that little area, and basically increase the amount of that the plants are getting, and they're going to get bigger. So what we're doing here is different than that, and we're actually we have to use copper wire because we're not working with the magnetism of the Earth. We're working with kind of like the dielectric aspect of it, okay? So this is harder to explain, but basically the Earth it's spinning, and it's in a field, created by the sun. The sun's also in a field created by the center of the galaxy and its relationship to all these other things. But basically, we've got lots of spinning things inside of magnetic fields and all that type of stuff. And when you do that, it kind of creates energy, and the energy wants to fling outwards. Okay, this is the way I look at it. This isn't like the technical way of describing it. But basically, lightning goes from the Earth to the sky. It's not the other way around. Everyone thinks it's going downwards. It's actually going up into the sky. Okay, so basically we're using the copper wire. It's better for this. It doesn't affect the magnetic field. Using iron when you're working with the dielectric field is not going to be a good idea. It's because it's going to mess with the magnetism of everything at the same time, and it kind of, you might get a good effect, but you might not get a good effect, and it's really hard to predict. Okay, so anyways, basically what we're doing is we're running a wire. So for example, the difference of basically voltage is a difference of energy between two places. Okay, so if you look at my feet and then you go up a couple of inches, there's a little bit of a voltage difference between those two locations. Okay, and it increases drastically the higher that you go up. So once you get up to 6 feet, you know, you're at pretty high voltage. It's really low amperage, but high voltage. Okay, so this is basically a battery. So basically you're creating a situation like that if you run a pole that goes fairly high into the ground and also goes down into the ground. That's really important. The pyramids are basically an example of what I'm talking about here. Wardenclyffe Tower, built by Tesla, is basically an example of this. Trees are basically an example of this. This is why things are largely vertical and growing, because they're basically creating this flowing of energy, which we're basically just increasing by adding this copper wire. Okay, so it's going to make it easier for this natural energy, which is flowing on me, standing with my bare feet on the ground right now. But if I had a copper wire wrapped around me, that's going to be much more powerful. Okay, so basically that energy is also going to basically affect this entire area of the garden. And the biggest way it's going to help is it's going to encourage water and nutrients to come up into the plants. That's basically the main effect that's going on there as far as we understand. Okay, so anyways, it's probably not all completely accurate, but I hope it's kind of helpful for you to get an idea of what the goal is here. But this is basically just a big experiment to see, you know, how it's going to affect this garden. So we're also going to be doing other experiments in the future, but this video is just going to be about this thing. So basically I'm going to go ahead and get started doing the work. Okay, so we've got some sunchokes growing right here, and I feel bad about it, but some of them get sacrificed. But basically I'm going for right here, so I'm going to move some of these rocks out of the way, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the wire underneath this whole layer of rock so that it's not in the garden, because we are growing tubers here, so we don't want copper wire underneath when we have to dig in to get to the actual thing. So basically I'm going to put it underneath the rocks, and hopefully that'll work. Okay, so let's dig a hole. Okay, we're gonna put the pole in there just to see. Seems like a pretty decent way down. I don't think the wind's gonna blow that anywhere. So it's a pretty decent height too, even that far into the ground. So over 6 feet tall, but not so tall that I can't reach up and actually work on it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, so the wire is going to be coming down and going this way around, and then it's going to continue going this way. So I'm going to come around and pull out all these rocks and keep them nearby so I can just put them right back where they were. And I'm just going to dig out a little bit of a space for the wire to go. And I'm going to do that for the whole garden. Okay, we got it all ready to start putting the wire in. I think I'll start there so that I can wind it down and then have something to pull tight against, rather than starting here where I won't have anything to pull tight against. Okay, so I'm going to wrap a little bit extra up here in case I want to try something, or maybe I'll just leave it like that. Now, I hear that you're supposed to wrap it going clockwise, going downwards, which is the opposite of what I'm doing. But I'm doing that because that's just the way the spiral garden spins, and I want to go with the spiral garden, the way it's spinning. And next time, if I ever do another spiral garden, then I'll probably make it go the other way and see if that changes anything. But some people say it doesn't really even matter which way it's wrapped, so I'm not too worried about it. So I'm just gonna wrap it all the way down, and then I'll show you once I get to the bottom. Okay, so we've got it wrapped around, going all the way up. with a little thing sticking up. And I also wrapped it going basically all the way down to the bottom, and then it comes back up again. You can see, can you see here? Let me get out of it, sun. You can see this wire here. So basically now that's gonna just follow this trench that I made. So first I'm going to put some rocks and fill this back in so that it's nice and solid so I can pull against it without worrying about it leaning to one direction or the other. Okay, now I'm going to just pull the wire along this trench for the entire spiral. So I'm actually going to bury it as I go along, because if I don't, then it'll be easier to accidentally pull it out while I'm working with it. Okay, I've reached the end of the spiral garden, and you can see we have a little bit left. Not very much left. I thought we'd have a lot more, but the 100 feet roll was just about right. So while I was working, I started to get a little bit more nervous about not having spun it correctly the right way, and thinking, well, maybe it wouldn't even be a good idea to do it if it's going the wrong direction. So I should probably go and research this more thoroughly. So I went and looked it up, and turns out I am actually going the right direction. So basically, if you're in the northern hemisphere, you want to wind clockwise as you're going from the bottom to the top, and if you're in the southern hemisphere, then you would wind counterclockwise as you're going from the bottom to the top. So basically that's the way that the spiral garden goes naturally, which is awesome and perfect. So now basically it's definitely going to work the way it's supposed to. Well, not definitely, we'll see, that's the experiment, but at least it's set up how you're supposed to set it up. So now I'm going to hop on to just putting the rocks back, and then we'll be done. All right, there she is, all put back together with the Electroculture upgrade. I think it looks pretty sweet. So while I was looking that stuff up in the middle of it, I also learned that there's a difference between some of the things that I was talking about and Electroculture. So the earlier things with the magnet and also the galvanized wire with the magnets going north-south, that's called Magneticulture, which is technically different than Electroculture. I kind of see them as the same thing, but just so you know, there is a distinction there. And anyways, I think we'll probably just leave this. I might try some of that Magneticulture on this, but at the moment I'm thinking probably not. I'll probably just let this be an electrocultural experiment without having the extra variable of the Magneticulture, and see how it does. And maybe we can add the Magneticulture next year if I'm still here. So also, in the next week or two, I'm going to be putting together a bunch more little tiny experiments of Electroculture. Basically the same thing that we have going on here, except, you know, much smaller. So it's going to be on plants that are planted in pots. So each pot will, some pots will have some of these, some of them will be going the opposite direction spun, some of them will have the plastic still on the wire, some of them may be longer, shorter, some may be deeper into the soil, and of course some won't have anything at all. So basically that'll be a more thorough experiment to see if any of these variables are important. So anyway, stay tuned if you want to see that, and if you want to see how well the spiral garden grows this year, and I'll see you guys later.